Welcome to Frightening Fiction, the YouTube channel dedicated to all things horror. If you're a fan of scary stories and spine-tingling thrills, then you've come to the right place. Today's story is called The Midnight Killer, a terrifying tale of stalking and murder. The streets of downtown were eerily quiet as the clock struck midnight. The only sound was the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. Rachel hugged her coat tightly around her, quickening her pace as she made her way home from the library. She had always loved the peace and solitude of the night, but lately, something had been off. There had been a string of murders in the city, all of them happening late at night and all of them brutal. The police were baffled and the killer was still at large. Rachel had tried to tell herself that she was being paranoid, that the killer wouldn't come after her. But as she turned the corner and found herself face to face with a figure in a dark hoodie, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that washed over her. "Hey," the figure said, his voice rough and menacing. "Give me your wallet." Rachel's heart raced as she fumbled for her purse, her hands shaking as she handed over the wallet. The figure snatched it from her and backed away, a wicked grin on his face. "Thanks," he sneered before turning and disappearing into the darkness. Rachel let out a sigh of relief, her knees feeling weak as she made her way home. She vowed to be more careful in the future, but deep down, she knew that it wouldn't be enough. The midnight killer was still out there, stalking the streets and preying on the innocent. A week passed and the murders continued. The city was in a state of panic and the police were no closer to finding the killer. Rachel was jumpy and on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder and avoiding the streets at night. One particularly dark and stormy evening, Rachel was working late at the library, trying to focus on her studies despite the howling wind and pounding rain. She was the only one left in the building and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. As she gathered her things to leave, she heard a faint noise behind her. She turned, her heart racing, but there was no one there. She must be imagining things, she told herself, but as she made her way to the door, she heard the noise again, louder this time. She spun around, her eyes searching the shadows, but there was still no one there. She was about to write it off as her imagination when she saw a figure emerge from the stacks. It was the midnight killer. Rachel froze, her body trembling as the killer advanced on her, a wicked grin on his face. She knew she had to think fast or she would be the next victim. She scanned the room, looking for something, anything, to defend herself with. Her eyes landed on a heavy textbook on the table. She lunged for it, swinging it at the killer with all her might. It connected with a satisfying thud and the killer stumbled, his hood falling back to reveal a face twisted with rage. Rachel didn't wait to see if he would get back up. She ran for the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She burst out into the storm, the rain and wind whipping around her as she stumbled down the steps. She didn't stop running until she reached the safety of her apartment. She locked the door behind her and collapsed on the couch, her body shaking with fear and adrenaline. She knew she had to go to the police, but she was terrified. The killer was still out there, and he knew what she looked like. But she couldn't just sit and do nothing. She had to take a stand. Rachel summoned all of her courage and made her way to the police station the next morning. She told them everything she knew and showed them the textbook she had used to defend herself. They took her information and promised to do everything they could to catch the killer. As the days went on, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She was jumpy and on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder. She knew the killer was still out there, waiting to strike again. One night, as she was walking home from class, she heard a faint noise behind her. She turned, her heart racing, but there was no one there. She was about to write it off as her imagination when she felt a sharp pain in her back. She stumbled and fell to the ground, the world spinning around her. As she lay there, struggling to stay conscious, she saw the midnight killer standing over her, a satisfied grin on his face. "You shouldn't have gotten involved," he sneered before disappearing into the night. Rachel's vision faded to black as she felt the life drain from her body. The last thing she saw was the face of the killer, haunting her even in death. The Midnight Killer was never caught and the string of murders continued for years, the killer's identity always remaining a mystery. Rachel's case remained unsolved, just one more victim of the brutal and ruthless killer who terrorized the city late at night. Thanks for watching another episode of Frightening Fiction. If you enjoyed the chills and thrills, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a scary story. Until next time, keep it frightening.